when we have a crush on someone, which you do have on Astra, big one, we become very self-aware of our bodies, of everything. Now, in what you might choose, I go to the most obvious, I hope you'll reject that, which is to fix your face, or fix your hair, or put a drop of perfume on your kerchief, or I give myself 10 things I could do, and I try them all, always remembering that the purpose is not to finish the activity, but to know what it would be. In any monologue, by the way, I always say, what would I do here if I didn't talk? And I explore all of that, and then at some point it's going to be very easy to start talking. Right. Okay? But you see, the doing is what releases the inner life and releases the images. And makes you need to talk. Otherwise you stand and you don't even know, I mean, the years I stood with monologues and thought, how can I start talking? Not sneaking in, and not starting that way, but starting. You know? Now, the purpose of this exercise, which follows talking to yourself, is to discover all the problems that occur when we have to talk to the audience. I played a lot of plays like that, and it was always unbelievably difficult for me if I left the circumstances in which the play took place. Let's assume it's the Brecht, there are many monologues for the character Shente, whom I played, where she talks to the audience about what she's doing. And if I went from 18th century China to a contemporary audience at the Phoenix Theater where I played it, there were two such totally different realities that I could never recover. So I created for myself imaginary people that were from the little village in China where I lived, who were passers-by, who were observing what I'd been doing, so that I didn't lose my character or my time and place by looking at the audience here. Direct eye contact with people who sit in the auditorium. Anybody who tells you you should make eye contact with them is crazy. And I say, to prove the point to yourself, remember the times when you have sat in an audience and a performer has looked right at you. You immediately get very self-conscious. Women always start adjusting their brassiere straps, you know. She's looking at me. What is expected of me? What does she want? Now, that can't help the actor if he sees he's made somebody very uncomfortable. So, in order not to make eye contact, I take my imaginary people and place them in the audience, either directly over their heads or in aisles, and I now address them. And everybody here thinks I'm talking to them. You will feel included, more included than if you actually make eye contact. You know, if there's a spill of light here from the stage that makes these eyes visible, and those are just bodies, that's fine. You can look at bodies, but they won't feel attacked, and you won't feel that they interfere with your reality. So now how do I talk to somebody like that? So I've given the actor in this the problem of placing somebody in their own space, imaginarily here, and telling them something to see how this can work.
Oh, boy. I had a great time. The best time is when I'm doing stuff with my nephews and nieces. Like, for the past 3 years, every Christmas Eve day, I get a pad and a pencil, and I write down the names of all my sisters and all their kids and all my friends that have kids. There's so damn many of them, if I don't write them down, I forget them all. So, I take a pad, I write down all their names, and I call all their parents, and I ask, you know, what did the kids ask for from Santa Claus this year? And then I write down, I have a list, so this way I'm in the know. So the day goes on, I usually go to, well, this year I went to an early mass with my folks, Christmas Eve, and we went back, had dinner. And then during dessert, when we're having coffee, I grab the list, and I grab the phone, and I start calling up. So this year I called my little niece, Rachel, who lives in Dallas, Texas. So I called her on the phone, and I said, "Hello? Is this Rachel?" She says, "Yes." And I said, "This is Santa." She says, "Hi, Santa. I said, well, in about 15 minutes, we'll be pulling out. So we're just going over the list one last time to make sure there aren't any errors. I said, we just want to make sure everything's correct. And she says, okay, Santa. And so what I do is I go through the list, but I always fuck up one thing, just, to keep them on their toes. So, for example, like she wanted a Barney doll, so I said Barbie. So I said, and that'll be a Barbie doll? She says, oh, no, she says Barney. And I go, oh, Rudolph. I said, Rudolph, that second sack there on the left. I said, make sure. I said, Rachel doesn't want a Barbie doll, she wants a Barney doll. See if we can make a last-minute substitution. And then the kid, totally goes for it. And I yell orders to the elves, to the reindeer. So we do the thing, right? So it's hysterical. But the thing is, I can't laugh, because if I laugh, I blow Santa Claus for the kids, right? So then I say, well, will you be leaving something for Santa and the reindeer to eat? And she says, yes, Santa. And I say, well, will you be leaving this year? She says, oh, some cookies and some milk for Santa. And I said, and what about the reindeer? She said, some carrots and some celery. And I said, well, that's nice. I said, do you think maybe you could leave a tall glass of warm water with 3 tablespoons of sugar dissolved in it? And she says, uh-huh. And I said, you think your mom has a can of sardines? And so she says, you hear, Mom? She says, yeah. My sister's in the background yelling, yeah. She says, do we have any sardines? And she goes, who are you talking to? She says, Santa. So then you hear this pause in the background. You know that my sister's sitting there processing, what the hell's going on. And she can't laugh. She's got to go with it because it's Santa Claus. So I had my other niece leave cheese. I told him Santa had a hankering for some cheese. I said, and do you think you can ask your mom to cut the cheese this year? So, of course, it goes way over his head. I'm dying. And my little nephew, I told him that I had a hankering for some pickles. I said, do you think you can ask your mom to dice those pickles really small? I said, because we'll be in a hurry, we won't have time to chew, and I don't want anyone choking on the way out the door. So, of course, these kids don't go to bed until my sisters or brothers go through all of this stuff, right? It was hysterical.
Okay. Now, how did you feel?
I felt pretty good.
You made some interesting errors. Do you know what they are?
Hit me.
All right. The first moment, where were they?
Right there.
What is it anchored to?
To the right of the young lady with the red sweater and microphone.
Okay, to that mic. All right, fine. Now, you didn't establish that reality for you when you started talking.
I jumped right in.
Yeah, you jumped right in without finding the person you want to direct it to. So the first moment was muddy. Do you understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. Okay? Then you have much too many activities.
Okay.
Now I want you to try it again and find where you stop to tell the story.
Right, okay.
All right? Now whether you pull the chair around or sit where you are.
Sit where I am right now, maybe, yeah.
Right? You see, now try it again. Let it without further thought and see what happens.
Oh, I had a great time. The best time was when I'm spending time with my nephews and nieces. So for the past 3 years now, every Christmas Eve day, I write down all the kids' names, all my sisters and all their kids and all my friends that have kids. There's so many of them. If I don't write them down, I'm never going to remember them. So at any rate, I write down all their names, and then I call their parents, and I find out what it is that the kids want for Christmas from Santa this year. So that way I'm in the know. And so I call, I get the list, and the day goes on. And I went to Mass this year with my parents, an early Mass. We had dinner. Then after dinner, we're having coffee and dessert. And I grab the list, and I grab the phone, and I start calling everybody.
Okay, this is fine, you see? Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Now what's interesting is that you, just where you got up and got the plate, I was going to say you don't have to stay there.
Right.
So you followed through on an impulse that was absolutely correct. But if the task becomes so primary...
Right, I felt that as I began.
That's what I wondered.
Especially with the silverware, I meant, this is too primary, back off. But, no, what is so important, what I continue to find strength in, no matter what I'm working on, is that sense of place. Absolutely. And the more you know where the hell you are,
absolutely,
you're grounded.
Absolutely.
Then you can add other things. But if you don't have that, there's nothing.
Nothing. Now, this was a very good example, and it worked beautifully, especially the second time through. Okay? All right. Very good.